But hello, everybody. This is Morgan Caraway of Sustainable Life School. I'm talking to Kelly Hart today. Kelly Hart is a man of many talents, and I have a feeling he's lived a very interesting life. He is the man behind websites greenhomebuilding.com, dreamgreenhomes.com, earthbagbuilding.com, and the Natural Building blog. And I would try to introduce the books that Kelly has written, but Kelly has written a lot of books. And I think you're a man with a very complex and varied history. So would you like to give a little biographical introduction of yourself? And also at some point in the conversation, plug any books or anything you would like, and anything you may be working on currently.
Okay, that description you just gave is accurate. I'm now 81 years old, which means I have a number of decades of experience to fall back on. I was born in Utah. No, actually, I was born in Idaho, from parents of polygamous families. I had 4 grandmothers as I was growing up.
Wow.
And they initially were part of the Mormon Church, but around the time that I was born, they both left that faith.
Yeah. And
so I was brought up as what they call a Jack Mormon, and my father was a builder. You were wondering if how I came upon natural building as an interest. Well, I grew up with my father being a natural builder.
Okay.
He built his own writing cabin out of rocks and wood that he gathered. And he was a cabinet maker during the time I was a child. And so I learned that craft at his knees, and was employed by him to do some of the tasks of finishing some of his cabinetry. And so I grew up as being a builder, and did a lot of remodeling and construction projects as I grew, so that I have quite a lot of experience in doing that kind of work. And in the process of doing remodeling and whatnot, I realized a number of the pitfalls of conventional construction, and how it can lead to failures. And
wood is a temporary, unless you really do it right, it's an inherently temporary material.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, and you got to be really careful, to make sure it doesn't get damp and whatnot. I have a daughter living in San Francisco who has a problem with molds, affecting her. And the house that she's been living in is an old house in San Francisco that was not properly built in the first place, and probably not well enough maintained.
Yeah,
it's riddled with mold.
Yeah, that's a huge problem where I live as well. We're in a very moist area here. Temperate rainforest is what they call it.
Yeah.
And the houses get eaten by the mold here.
Right.
Yeah.
So when I got to the point of thinking about building my own house, I did some research, and I was, I was a filmmaker, uh, and I had made a film about sustainable architecture, interviewing people all over the country. But one of the people I interviewed was Nader Khalili in California, who claims to be the father of earthbag building. Actually, he wasn't quite, but he did embrace it, and so I was introduced to the whole concept of earthbag building, and realized that it had an awful lot going for it. That
Yeah,
in general, there's nothing to mold, in
exactly.
most of the ways that earthbag building is done. And that was important to me. I've seen and actually can say that straw bale building has a lot of merit, but I didn't want to build with straw because
Right.
eventually it can mold. And you have
We went through the same thought process here.
Yeah.
I read straw bale building first, but being so moist here, if you build one of those, I heard of one, there's a nearby intentional community to where we live, and I heard they have a truth window in a straw bale there, and it's black mold.
Uh-huh.
That's big trouble.
Big
That's
trouble.
big trouble. People aren't
Absolutely.
aware that mold can kill you, give you chronic health issues. Probably your daughter has learned some about these things, I would
Oh yeah,
imagine.
she has, and she's still struggling with it.
My wife is mold sensitive,
Yes.
so
That's a
we've been
lot of
through it, and
an awful lot of people are.
yeah,
So the first, well, actually, the probably the third house that I built um, was with earth bags, and that was up in Colorado, and I was really pleased with how that went.
was this a Crestone house?
Yes, that's right. You may have seen that when you were in Crestone doing that.
Well, what happened was we've had two workshops in Crestone, earth bag workshops, with our friend Willow who lives out there.
Yeah.
And what happened was they did go tour your house. Our workshop did. We had about probably 15 people there that day.
Uh-huh.
I got sick. I got a terrible stomach flu, so
Oh dear.
I missed it. But we were in your neighborhood, I think, essentially there in Crestone.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of natural buildings of
Yeah,
all
Crestone
sorts.
is famous for natural building, and there's an awful lot going on there.
Yeah,
Um,
I like Crestone. I enjoy my visits there.
yeah, I lived a total of probably more than 15 years there,
Yeah,
and it's a wonderful place.
yeah,
I'm living in New Mexico now at a lower elevation and a warmer climate that
yeah,
that's easier for my wife and I at this point.
yeah. What part of New Mexico?
Silver City.
I'm not sure where that is.
It's
I haven't made it down to New Mexico yet. Really.
it's in southern New Mexico. We're only about a
Mm.
100 miles from the Mexico border.
Yeah, yeah. I've usually when I get done with the workshop out there, I'm burned out and ready to be home, so I shoot
Yeah.
straight back. But I've wanted to check out Taos. Obviously, the Earthship movement kind of
Yeah.
got big there and started there. I just haven't made it over that far yet.
Yeah, we're living in an old adobe house that we bought
Oh, nice.
that I fixed up in various ways. But speaking of mold free, adobe doesn't mold.
I've
And
always wanted. I've heard Taos has really some nice examples of Adobe. I've always wanted to check out some Adobe. I don't know if I've seen many of those yet. Crestone probably has one or two, but I don't know if what I was looking at was Adobe or not.
right.
But adobe is basically you take a form and you make bricks out of mud and straw. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, right. You use, a certain percentage of clay and sand and mix it with straw to help bind it together,
Yeah,
and then you build them as blocks. Um,
yeah,
it's it's very similar to cob construction, but instead of just piling stuff up with cob, with adobe, you make bricks out of it, and then you
right.
mortar them together with the same kind of mortar.
Yeah, I've always wanted to see that process, and I haven't had a chance to get hands on with that yet.
The nice thing about adobe is that it's excellent thermal mass, and
Right.
um, and what I've done with the house that we're living in here is that I put an exterior sheathing over the adobe, of about an inch and a half foam insulation,
Yeah.
and then I stuccoed over that so that
You got insulation on the outside, thermal mass on the inside. It's the
exactly.
ultimate combo. You probably basically don't have heating or cooling costs hardly, huh?
It's extremely efficient. I think it's the most efficient house that we've ever lived in. Uh,
Yeah.
I we do have a a furnace. It's winter time and we use a little furnace, but
Yeah.
I turn that off at night when we go to bed, and
Yeah.
and the temperature in the house only drops about 3 degrees overnight.
Yeah, so as you were saying, and for people who aren't familiar who might be watching, so Earth is a heavy, dense material, has a lot of thermal mass. It's kind of a thermal battery. Insulators are usually light and maybe have air gaps or light materials that separate temperatures. So,
Right,
like Kelly is saying, that thermal mass on the inside and that insulation on the outside, you've got your inside holding the warmth and then your outside keeping the cold or the hot out.
right.
Unfortunately, Kelly, I know you'd have to agree with me. If our society used these principles that we're talking about on a wide scale, application, it could probably cut the amount of energy it's expending on heating and cooling by 90%.
Yeah, something like that. And another thing to remember that's related to that is if you dig into the ground, and take advantage of the same thing that's happening beneath the surface of the earth,
That's
um,
right.
you can benefit from that, um, temperature that basically is constant. If you go down about
That's right.
6 or 8 feet into the ground, the temperature down there is constant all year round. Um,
I tell my students that looking underground is looking more attractive all the time.
all the time. Yeah.
As the world heats up and as the crazy cold events happen, we're having like a triple polar vortex here currently where waves of cold are coming down.
Yeah.
Being underground with that thermal mass, and both of our houses here are partially bermed. um,
Hmm.
so the other house is largely bermed. It's earthship inspired earthbag
Yeah,
house.
right. Well, the Earthships take advantage, and utilize that same concept. And you have,
Yeah, that's why I thought that design was so good and almost universally available for people to use that passive
mhm,
solar
yeah,
combined with the thermal mass to make a home that's much easier to heat and cool. you
right.
know
A good example of what we're talking about is directly beneath where I'm sitting right now is my shop, and it's a former garage that was dug into the hill, and so it's primarily bermed all the way around, and in this climate, I work down there every day, spend hours down there doing my artwork down there, and
yeah,
and I never have a heater or an air conditioning all year round,
that's
and I'm
right.
comfortable.
What is the ambient earth temperature down there? Do you know offhand? What does it
I
stay?
think it's probably right around 60.
Yeah, like Mike Reynolds said about Earthships, you see how I'm dressed up in here in a jacket.
Yeah,
Just dress a little bit warmer inside, and then that earth temperature will keep you at a fairly regular temperature most of the year
right.
round.
Yeah.
So, you see, these are easy principles that unfortunately the most of the building happening in the US, they're not taking any account of this. And it's basically just build you a box, you face it depending on which way the street is facing to face the street, and then you spend a fortune to heat and cool this thing. It might have a black roof surface, or a dark roof surface that's attracting incredible amount of heat, like shingle roofs and stuff. So unfortunately, because these easy principles, this isn't rocket science.
No.
Since these easy principles aren't taken into account, we're wasting a lot of energy,
Oh my
unfortunately.
God. Yeah,
And this is fossil energy largely. It's energy we're not going to get back.
that's right.
It'll
Yeah,
be whatever iteration finds our remains in 2 billion years that will, they'll have fossil energy again after we've shot the wad. Maybe it'll be some sort of sentient AI. Maybe it'll be a cockroach. We just don't know what it's going to be yet.
Right. Yeah, if you combine the thermal advantage of berming or digging into the ground with well-designed thermal mass on the inside, insulated from the outside, and then combine that with passive solar technology, simple design,
Yeah.
you can create a comfortable space that uses no energy.
We've had people come into our Earthship inspired earthbag house and they say, "Where's the heat?" Or "I don't see a fire going. How's it so warm in here?"
Mm-hmm.
They've been really shocked that in the winter you get free heat during the day.
Right. Yeah.
And everybody, unless you're one of the Elon Musks or Trumps of the world, we've all got a wallet we've got to look out for. So free heat should be on our priority list. And it's something that's easy to accomplish, heating and cooling. These are the things that I wish we could wake our larger culture up to. This kind of thinking, this wasteful thing. It's something we're deeply entrenched in, I feel like, in the United States, but it's going to run out. It's
not sustainable. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah. I explain to people, sustainable simply means it can carry on in perpetuity,
right,
without damaging the systems it depends on.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, with this fossil fuels love and, fracking and all these other things, they're all going to be short-lived in the big picture, short-lived energy sources.
It is, yeah.
I was looking on Amazon at, earthbag building books. And of course, your book is way up on the list, Earthbag Construction, right?
Yeah, I actually got two books, one that I published myself and the other one that was published by the Canadian publisher. Well, it's part of the Essential series, and it's published by New Society.
Oh yeah, New Society. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, in looking at your Earthbag book, that was when I came across your book of photography, taken during the 60s when you were living in San Francisco, Berkeley area, right?
Right. Yep.
And I've always been one who's been highly fascinated in the 60s as a phenomenon. And, really you were at the epicenter, that being the case that you were there, you were at the epicenter of that whole movement. I would say you were sort of at the center.
That's in some ways I was, yeah. I didn't really consider myself being there. I was more a documentarian.
Yeah.
I was photographing with still photographs, but I was also getting engaged in film. And
Yeah.
I did ultimately make a film with the San Francisco Diggers.
Right. Right. You
Um,
mentioned that detail to me. Um, and I'm a little bit familiar with the Diggers, but I'm not as familiar as you are. For
well,
sure.
the Diggers are really a bunch of interesting characters, and they stemmed from the drama world.
Mm,
They were involved in the meme troupe and similar theatrical organizations, and some of what they were doing was spontaneous productions on the street.
yeah.
And they came up with this notion that everything should be free.
Yeah. I remember they had a free kitchen, free food, right? Free
That's right.
medical care,
Yeah,
free
everything should be
stores,
free. They had
free
a
stores and stuff, right? A
they had
free
a
store where you just
store.
go get.
They had a store downtown in San Francisco that was the free store, and people would bring in stuff, and you never paid for anything.
Yeah.
I was kind of recruited as as a filmmaker by some of the principals of the Diggers, and they came to me. I was living clear up in Sonoma County, along the Russian River, way out, away from the urban population, and they tracked me down up there and appealed to me. They said, "Can you help us make this documentary we want to make called Now's Real?"
Mm, yeah.
And they had already done some footage, but the filmmaker who was working with them initially backed out of it, and they were kind of in a bind, and they needed to get somebody else active. And so I thought it over and realized, yeah, that would be kind of an interesting experience.
Yeah.
And so I spent much of a summer traveling around with the Diggers and filming um, what they were up to.
Yeah.
And ultimately, Peter Berg, who was one of the originators of the Diggers, um, and I did the editing on that film. And one of the caveats of the production was that it could only be shown for free,
Mm,
because
okay.
that was their ethos.
Right.
And
Right. That makes sense.
and the fact that it could only be shown for free meant that it wasn't shown very much.
Mm,
You couldn't interest a movie theater to show something
right.
just for free. So
Right.
it ended up being projected onto walls outside, on buildings, or it was shown at parties,
Yeah.
or at libraries,
Mm,
or miscellaneous ways
right.
to try to get it out to the public. There were some, fairly well-known people in the Diggers at that time,
Yeah.
including Peter Coyote, who
Yeah.
became
Peter Coyote's one I always think of. Yeah.
quite a well-known actor and narrator.
Yeah.
Um, and but early on in his career, he decided he didn't want that film to be shown that much,
Mm,
because he was trying to pursue this more legitimate kind of career in acting,
right.
and he appealed to us to not promote it, or at least not indicate that he was any part of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
It sounds from what I know like the Diggers were a pretty radical group in some ways.
yeah.
Um, and as you said, they seem kind of focused around social action.
Yes.
Um, where a lot of hippies kind of didn't. It was more of the turn on, tune in, and drop out thing. But it
Yeah.
felt like the diggers were actually people trying to get something done and something accomplished.
The diggers, they wanted to manifest social change.
Yeah.
And their methodology was via protest and theatrical, dramatic manifestations out in the world.
Yeah.
And so I filmed, a number of things that were pretty interesting.
Yeah.
One of the diggers was a Hell's Angel. And so there's a whole segment in Nazriel about the Hells Angels, and I rode on the back of his motorcycle, and we threw money out, coins out, and watched people run to pick up all these coins. And
Yeah, it seems to me like like I told you, I've always been fascinated by the 60s, especially because I feel like however you want to define it, change was in the wind, and it was big changes. And I think there's several things that precipitated it, including, I'll just say it right out, LSD coming on the scene and other mind altering substances. And I just think, and it's hard for, I think, us, we have some amount of political unrest now, but it's hard to imagine how charged things were once Vietnam was underway, and how strong people's movements were back then. Because lots of young Americans were coming home in body bags, and it was a charged time.
I had to deal with the draft. They were trying to get me to go to Vietnam.
Yeah.
I was right at that age, and there was no way I was going to do it.
Yeah.
Period. I would have moved to Canada if I
Right.
really needed.
Right. Well, you see in these situations how many of those people come back with PTSD, if they come back.
Yeah, it was. There's no way I couldn't pull out a gun and point it at somebody and pull a trigger. I just couldn't do it. It's against my principles. And,
right.
And so I went to school for a while. I studied at the Art Institute in San Francisco. Studied photography.
Yeah.
But then that didn't work as a way to keep from being drafted. And then I actually married my first wife, because if you were married, you weren't going to be drafted. But then they changed that law too, and
they kept yanking out the rug out from under you.
Yeah, and what eventually got me out of the draft was I made an appointment with a psychiatrist, and I didn't sleep the night I went in to see him, and I never looked him in the eye, and I told him various experiences I'd had on LSD.
Yeah.
As though they were real.
Yeah.
And he wrote up a nice little description of my mentality and sent it to the draft board. And I was classified 4F because I had schizophrenia.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, well played. What was that character in MASH who always wore the dress?
Yeah.
I've heard of that approach many times. And there was the guy in Catch-22, I think, who also was openly crazy, but nobody cared. I mean, what are they saying? This person's a basket case. They're not fit to go murder people. It's a strange thing.
But when I went to the draft physical, I deliberately didn't wear underpants. But that wasn't enough to disclassify me.
Yeah, you got to hedge your bets. You do as many things as possible. Yeah. Well, good on you. I've always felt that our culture was strange in a lot of ways.
Oh boy.
I think we have this image of ourselves as being, very advanced, much more advanced than civilizations
Oh,
of the past.
yeah. No, we're.
But
Um,
then you have using this technology that you're creating to find better ways to devise to murder people, quicker ways to extract the resources of the planet. So anyway, I will say, I've been out of stride with a lot of this culture for a long time,
mhm.
and I find myself further out of stride with it the further it goes.
Yeah, yeah. Especially now that Trump's back in.
I know. Well, I have some questions that were formulating in my mind as
Okay.
I was getting ready to call you. The progressive and environmental movements in the US have stalled. Ecocidal fascism is gaining popularity and traction around the globe. What do you think the chances are that there will be an ecological awakening in time to save civilization?
Well, I think that it's dependent on the consciousness of mankind. I think that we are probably in a process of evolving into a new uh, realm of consciousness, and until and unless that happens, I don't think we have much of a chance.
Agreed. I wrote a book called Ecological Awakening. And my thought was, at the time I was kind of into a spiritual movement called Advaita, non-duality, kind of an Eastern based,
Uh-huh.
a branch of Hinduism essentially. But ecological awakening was more true to my own personal experience and ideals. So I wrote this book hoping that it would appeal to spiritual people, and get more of the ecological mind, kind of going in that group of people. And the truth is, it just kind of totally fizzled. There wasn't really any interest in really talking about ecological ideas to most folks who are deeply into spiritual concepts and systems. It just never really seemed to get anywhere or go anywhere. So that was a little bit disappointing for me. Let's face it, if you're progressive in this country and if you're an ecologist, there's going to be a lot of disappointments going on for you now, and just in, like you said, the state of human consciousness currently.
Yeah, it's pretty clear to me that we really need to get beyond the level of consciousness that we're sort of cruising on right now.
Yeah.
And it's not just in the US, it's all over the world.
Yeah, I've labeled it ecocidal fascism. Um, and it's kind of like the Trump represents, Bolsonaro represented in Brazil. There's a lot of populist, like usually far right leaders who their policy is destroy the environment as quickly as possible for profit. They don't really believe in the environment. They don't seem to believe it matters.
Right.
They just believe that profit matters. So, they don't care at all, like Bolsonaro attacking the Amazon, Trump and Vance, drill baby drill. That was an actual quote that Vance said, drill baby. That's a catchphrase these guys came up with. So it's very sad. It's very sad to see that reflection of humanity or that aspect, which is totally disconnected from the environment and how important it is to every living thing on this planet.
Well, on some level, I've seen some analyses of this whole situation, and there's a strong suggestion that as humanity faces these extremes, that it's almost a necessity to deal with it, to experience it, to come up against it. That we really need to butt our heads up against this level of reality and unreality,
Yeah.
in order to jettison our consciousness into the next level.
Right. I understand that. It's kind of like hardship and challenging times can be the thing. Pain and suffering can be the thing that wake someone up.
Right.
Now, here's another trick though that we're dealing with in this current, modern um, zeitgeist or whatever's happening. We're dealing with, for example, I live in Madison County, North Carolina, and you heard about the storms that hit the mountain, Helene, and the damage it did.
Oh yeah.
Whole towns washed away.
Yeah.
The two nearest towns to me, Marshall and Hot Springs, they're beautiful downtown areas that were adjacent to rivers, were absolutely destroyed by this event. So to me, that is about as catastrophic of an event. I mean, admittedly, there's worse things, I suppose, but that's a catastrophic event. And what's interesting that I noticed is some people are like, yeah, this was a really rare event and these shouldn't be happening as much. It's climate change. Some people said that, but other people were like, well, the rich people in Europe are controlling the weather.
Oh.
They want your land, or they want
Yeah.
your quartz mines, or so the conspiracy kind of thinking. See, so I feel like if you're available to be present in your experience directly, and you see how odd the weather is getting, for example, that can kind of be a catalyst to awakening. But I feel like for a lot of people with the internet now and all the conspiracy ideas and theories, some of them, it just drives them further into their sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
another example of severe climate change is, look what's going on right now in Los Angeles.
I've heard about that. I don't look at the news anymore. It got too depressing for me.
I don't either. But my daughter lives in San Francisco, and her partner has parents in Malibu, and they had to evacuate their house because of the fire, and I saw some coverage of it last night, and it's just an inferno. I don't think that there's any chance that they're going to have a house.
My wife was telling me about it. So,
and this is January, the middle of the winter.
I know. Yeah, you're right. Well, that's the thing. So all of us now are getting more extreme weather, I feel like. And, they say that rich people created these storms to ruin the land here so they could come buy it. But I'm like, what about the wildfires? Are there wildfire machines? Are there, for every climate crisis and event that's going on, is there a special machine that somebody somewhere has invented? I think it's just strange the lengths people will go to explain away something very simple like climate change into these very complex, convoluted explanations. And they prefer the complex because maybe it removes personal responsibility. If I can blame it on a rich person or somebody else over there, then I don't have to take responsibility for what we're doing to the planet.
Yeah. But I think it's going to backfire on some people who are trying to profit from this, because ultimately it's going to deteriorate the economy to the point where they can't make money anymore.
Well, that's true. This is already affecting crops. This crazy weather, they're having more crop failures now. And then you've got the whole supply chain crisis, using petroleum to grow your crops and then ship it, however many hundreds or thousands of miles. I think you and I probably, I can at least say this about myself, and I get this impression from you. We're kind of more big picture minded, maybe sustainability. And I could come up with a lot of solutions for civilization right now. For example, like I'm getting ready to write an article, hopefully still for Mother Earth News, on a community idea I had come to me a few years ago. And it's a way to get rid of the supply chain crisis. It's a community that's built with human happiness in mind, basically a lot of natural areas, and natural areas central to the community as like the heart of the community. So I think there's a lot of solutions, but I think people are using the same old, going about things the same old way. And really that way is unsustainable, and it has to hit a wall and stop at some point. It's going to stop.
You're right. Yeah, it will.
And I was thinking about this the other day. We live in a complex time. What was that old Chinese curse? May you live in interesting times.
Right. Well, we are.
But it really is an amazing and beautiful time to be alive too. I was just thinking, we're getting to see so much change now, and so rapidly.
I think we chose to be here at this moment in history, and I wouldn't change my own life and the choices I've made. And I feel that there's a reason why I'm here, and I'm doing what I do as best I can. And I have for decades.
You seem to have had a very interesting life. Would you say a little about Owen Geiger? I know you were close friends with Owen. Owen passed away in 2018. Is that correct?
That sounds about right. Yeah.
In Thailand, I think, right?
In Thailand, that's right.
Yeah. Would you say a little bit about Owen? Owen, to me, he was kind of the main person I associated with earthbag building. After like Nader Khalili, I forget the other guy's name. There were the other guys, like you said, before Nader, Bernard Mink. I'm getting the name wrong. I'm not remembering who that was, but he was one of the main people. Owen was, that I associated with earthbag building, and I think he did quite a bit to popularize it as well. What would you say about your friendship, and what would you say about Owen?
Owen was a wonderful person. I first met him at one of the natural building colloquia here in New Mexico. And at a certain point, he decided he was going to spend some time in Crestone. And he came up there, and I invited him to my place. And at that point, which was an earthbag house, and he was so impressed with the earthbag technology that he embraced it at that point. So I introduced Owen.
I wasn't aware of that. Okay, cool. Yeah.
And he helped us. He stayed in the house and took care of our dogs while my wife and I were traveling, and we became pretty close friends. And to the point where, when he eventually decided to move to Thailand, he and I decided to work together to make earthbagbuilding.com. So that website was one that we shared, and also the naturalbuildingblog.com.
Yeah.
It's another website that we shared, and so we were kind of collaborators, the two of us, and I sold his plans through my Dream Green Homes website.
Yeah,
and he was a very prolific designer. He had an excellent mind for.
Yeah, I was really smitten by all those plans. I was smitten by that collection, and you could see he really worked on it. He put himself into it, Yeah,
he really did, and he. I think there's almost 100 earthbag, not entirely earthbag, but mostly earthbag plans that Owen designed that are still available. When he died, I acquired the files of his plans and continued to
Right.
sell.
Yeah, and thank you for allowing me to sell those too. Kelly allows me to sell those on my site for some commission, and as well as having them on his sites. And yeah, I really do think he did a really good job on those, and I just feel like the renditions of them were beautiful too. At the
Yeah,
time,
he
it was
was.
kind of cutting edge, computer graphics.
Yeah, he actually didn't do that computer graphics. As I said, he was living in Thailand at the time, and he availed himself of some technicians there at very
Yeah,
minimal cost to do a lot of those illustrations and whatnot.
yeah,
And I continue to honor Owen's desire for the family. He had an adopted family in Thailand that he wanted to benefit from his estate, basically,
yeah,
if he died. And I honor that and send a percentage of any sales that I make of his plans to
yeah.
that family in Thailand now.
That's awesome. Yeah. It's good to have a good friend or two in life, isn't it?
Yeah, and Owen was a very good friend, and I was very honored and pleased that we had such a close relationship, during the time that he was alive.
Yeah. Yeah. I think most people who start researching earthbag at some point they come across you and Owen. So most people that I talk to are kind of generally familiar if they're familiar with the earthbag technique. I did have a question for you about earning one's livelihood
Yeah.
and doing it in a way that does not destroy your soul. And here's the question. So, what do you think is the best way to reconcile your passions and your occupation? In other words, how do you make a living that feeds your soul?
I would say very simply to follow your bliss.
Yeah,
To listen to your soul, to listen to what is eager to come out, and to manifest that, and everything else will flow directly from that.
nice. Yeah. I know we live in a time where people are economically fixated. For example, in this last election, one side, all they're saying is, remember how cheap stuff was when we were in office the last time. That was their whole argument. There was no, we're going to make, things better. We're going to take care of people better. We're going to, protect the environment. There's none of that. It's just remember how cheap stuff was.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of people are totally fixated on economics. They're not thinking about how their occupation is making them happy or is an expression of what they want to do with their life.
No, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So, for me, I've got my passions. Earth building has been one of my passions, and I make games. I make like card games and video games and all these things. And, really kind of like, where we are here in this like technological situation that we're in with the internet and with everything's kind of glutted, to some extent. Like, for example, video games. There's probably like 20,000 video games released a day. That may be a guess on different platforms. So everything is kind of like competing for limited attention. There's more and more being released. Like I saw, like, for example, I think last year more songs were released in one day than in like the whole year of 1990 something.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're kind of at a point, I feel like, where attention has kind of become the gold standard. And this sort of segues into my next question here. What do you think about people's addiction to smart devices? Is it the case that the devices are becoming smarter and the people are becoming dumber?
It seems that way sometimes. I I have an iPhone that's supposed to be a smartphone, and the darn thing drives me crazy sometimes because it doesn't really seem all that smart.
I know what you mean. I have certain things I do on my phone, like quick open camera. Somehow I hit something on it. I don't want to open the camera. I'm using the flashlight for something else. Quick opens camera and it turns my flashlight off because now the camera is using it. There's a lot of irritating
Yeah,
things built in.
exactly. And I use mine only minimally, and there's an awful lot of talk and discussion these days about AI, and how it's going to take over.
Yeah.
And I'm not, frankly, all that concerned about it.
See, you just segued into my next question, and that's pretty cool. Do you have speculations about how AI will affect civilization and human relationship?
Well, I'm hoping that AI can be used as a tool to help us make appropriate choices as we go along. I think it has potential to do that, but I think that we need to limit the way we use it, and to be careful with not giving over our autonomy and giving over our soul to that kind of technology. And I don't think that's going to happen. And it's never really made me lose sleep at night or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I know an awful lot of people are concerned about it. And so I think that we just need to be careful.
One thing that concerns me is go into a room of people now and look at them. And they're right next to each other. And you know what I mean? Like it, I think
yeah, right. Yeah.
I think the thing about it is that, so attention now is the real commodity, attention.
Yeah.
And they're trying to hold your attention. So with these devices, you've got an algorithm. For example, Google has a nice little algorithm of each of us, which is an effigy, but it takes all your interests. It knows exactly what you spent money on. It knows exactly what you look up. It knows how long, the amount of information contained in these algorithms. It knows exactly how long you pause when you're scrolling through a feed at certain things and even think about clicking it. So the thing it's trying to accomplish is to keep you attached, to keep you looking, to keep your attention on the device, so they get more revenue, advertising revenue and things.
Right. The same thing happens with YouTube. There's a lot of
oh, exactly. Well, Google owns YouTube, as you're aware, but it's all of them. You know, my dad is into this kind of like far right, Steve Bannon's War Room type stuff on YouTube. And, he gets stressed out. They're selling you a bunch of fear, and they're selling you, oh, the immigrants are coming. The immigrants are coming. And I said, Dad, if you're not careful, they're going to have you ready to strap a bomb to yourself and blow people up. You need to get out of that. But what I'm saying is the algorithm will feed you whatever poison you like, even if it's something harmful or even if it's something that doesn't benefit humanity or anyone in particular,
Yeah, and for that reason, it's best to limit the amount of time that you allow yourself to sit before a screen and absorb it, to deal with it.
Exactly.
And it's, they're finding that this to be a real developmental problem with children.
You're 100% right about that. I have a 10-year-old son, and, I'm a technology guy. I always have been. So, my vote was to get him a device when he was young. But they've said, since these like smart devices and everything else have come online, the childhood depression rate has gone up. I think between 2010 and 2015, the suicide rate in teenage girls went up 70%. Right as these things were coming online, and the social media and everything. Right. So I agree with you. I think that's a danger, too much of it to our children.
Yeah, there's some schools that are not allowing kids to carry their phones into classrooms now.
My son's school doesn't allow it. It's a private school, but he is device free all day when he's there, and that's just the way it is.
I think that's a good move. I think
it's great. We love that because we know he's safe from the device and the attachment to it. I told my son, you have different brain chemicals, and I'm afraid that the algorithms, they're probably directly connecting it to, they feed you different brain chemicals as it goes. There's the cortisol, which is they give you a little bit of fear. They give you some fear in your news feed. You click on it because it's the cortisol. Mm-hmm. Then they give you dopamine, something that feels good. It's kind of rewarding. So I just feel like we are on a slippery slope with AI, that with the goal being to keep our attention, what happens when they have our complete attention and we are totally fixated on that thing and people aren't really able to connect anymore? I noticed there's just, my friends all seem to have less time to hang out. And I talk to everybody. I talk to my other friends who live in other places, and they're like, people really don't seem to gather as much anymore, or they don't seem to have as many events, or, So I don't know. I feel like this does present some challenges to human relationship. And then the second part is the quality of the information we're getting. You probably heard Facebook threw out its fact checking wing, because they're just saying the times have changed. Nobody cares. So and that they've said that disinformation travels a lot faster than information.
Yeah, it's a kind of insanity. The more we devote our attention and allow ourselves to be manipulated by those media you're discussing, it erodes our sanity.
I think you're 100% right. Yeah. I feel like humanity is in this place of being asleep, and, obviously not physically asleep, and these devices are part of that sleep that we're in.
I think that the antidote is to get out into nature.
That's right.
To spend time in nature and listen to it and merge with it and realize your natural essential being as a part of it. And that's
goosebumps. It's so well said.
That's the alternative to AI.
That's right. I think you're 100% right. And I think that's what humans are slowly losing. Like, I see some young people now, and all I ever see them doing is that. That's all I ever see them doing. And you're 100% right. Unless you connect with the magnificence of nature, you're not going to realize its worth, and you're not going to have it as a core value. You're getting drawn deeper and deeper into this land. You're getting drawn deeper and deeper into the device. And that's what they want. They want you to be attached to that device. So you're making them at revenue.
That's right.
So, but I like what you said. And that's beautiful the way you expressed it. Like, for me, I call it sanity walks. Every day I try to take my nice long walk out in the woods.
Yeah.
And to reconnect,
Yeah, I go walking with my dog every morning. And then I work in my shop. And that's where I get my bliss. I decided several years ago to devote my time to artistic endeavors.
Yeah.
And so I started doing sculpture out of wood. And I would go out into the national forest. We live right next to the Gila National Forest here, and you could get a firewood permit, and you could scavenge for firewood. Well, I was scavenging for wood that I could use in my sculpture.
Yeah.
And I created a bunch of interesting sculptural art that I have on exhibit in downtown Silver City now.
Cool.
And then I evolved. I wasn't selling it, and realized that at a certain point, I was going to run out of space for, and so I decided, and I came up with a whole other approach to doing my craft and making some money at it, which was creating what I call sculpted tiny homes. Based on travel trailers, and I have created two of those. The first one was a rather small travel trailer, and the name of the sculpted tiny home was Full Circle, and most of the imagery inside the cabinet doors and the doors and other the tabletop and other aspects of the interior were created with what is commonly called in the U.S. wood inlay, or in Europe it's called marquetry, and almost all of the marquetry that I did in Full Circle was based on crop circle designs.
Oh, wow.
Which are amazing. I mean, if you start pouring through all the crop circles that have happened around the world, and especially in England, there's some images that are just phenomenal. And so I would duplicate those images in wood inlay or marquetry, and I sold that tiny home without even advertising it. A good friend bought it. And it's now being rented out as an Airbnb.
It sounds awesome. Yeah. See, I think one problem when we're talking to you is you're a man of so many passions and interests and of a very varied life. So maybe I'll get you to send me a big list of links, maybe where people can also see those. I have not seen those tiny homes yet. I have not come across.
Yeah, we've got another website, heartworks.com, HARTWORKS.com, where you can see examples of almost all of the stuff that I've done over my life, including animated movies, and films that I've done, including the film that I made with the Diggers. There's a link to those.
Oh, very cool.
And then there's all the sculpture that I've done, and the sculpted tiny homes, and currently I'm doing marquetry.
I'm typing this website down so I don't forget.
Okay.
But yeah.
And I joined the local art guild cooperative gallery in downtown Silver City, and I have my work on display down there. Just the marquetry, and it's selling very well. And one of the nice things about it is that I by joining this cooperative, I spend about 15 hours a month manning the gallery. The gallery is open all the time, every day of the week. And last month I sold about $1,500 worth of market.
Wow, nice.
Yeah,
nice.
So
that's awesome.
It's not only satisfying my artistic impulse.
Yeah.
I'm making money on it, and that's a perfect example of following my bliss.
Right.
Advising people to do that.
I think a lot of us struggle to make that. Like, for example, I've written, I think, 6 or 7 books. Some have been self-published. One was published by a British publisher, but there hasn't been much money in any of that, And I'm making all these video games and stuff. and there hasn't been much money in any of that. So it's nice when the two can come together. It's a nice thing. But the truth is, I can swing a hammer and I can do things with my body to make, a little bit of money here and there. And really, I guess following your bliss is important, whether it makes money or not.
It is. Yes, because you need to, in your life, you need to satisfy your soul,
You need
your
to fill your
purpose.
cup some. Yeah, the cup
Yep.
needs to be filled.
Yep.
Yeah. So, I guess it's the finding balance in life between all these different things,
Right.
to the best of our ability.
Yeah. At this juncture in my life, I'm doing everything I can to stay healthy. Like I eat
Yeah.
well.
You look good. You seem like
Thank
a
you.
healthy 81.
Thank you. Yeah, and I feel it. And I'm shooting to be 100 at least.
You probably only party with the bikers once or twice a month, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you party with the bikers too much, you ain't going to make it to 100. You ain't going to make
Yeah.
it.
Right. So, I don't sit at a computer any more than about 1 or 2 hours at a time, and I have to get up. I have to move. I have to go work,
Yeah.
and that's where the craft work I do with the wood keeps me active.
I think that's another danger of the devices. When you're being a couch potato for too many hours, your body isn't getting what it needs.
No, it doesn't.
And that means less serotonin, less, happiness in your life.
Right.
And it means a shorter lifespan. If you're not working the body enough, it's going to give out at a younger age.
I'm convinced that that's true.
Yeah. Well, you seem not to, blow too much air up your bum, but you seem like a wise man, and you seem that you're having a life that you enjoy.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I like to tell people, I think a lot of young people now kind of do live in this sort of like artificial world of the devices and like kind of like a feeling of kind of doom in a way. But I like to tell people that you kind of can create the life you want, to a point at least. It may not look exactly like you think it should or want it to, but you can create a satisfying life for yourself and for the people you love.
Absolutely. I think that it's quite feasible and likely, if you really focus your attention, that you can manifest damn close to what you want in your life.
Yeah. I think, a lot of people, and I think one thing, when we first started earth building, you kind of take the leap of faith. You go off on a different path than, society is kind of heading one way, the culture, and
Mm-hmm.
you take a turn off of that. But it also gives you faith in your abilities and powers, and it's very empowering.
Mm-hmm.
And then you realize, wait, a lot more than I thought is possible is possible. And life can be, let's just be frank, magnificent.
Life is magnificent.
Thank you.
You just have to embrace it.
That's right. That's right. And I think it's kind of a motion of going from a dependent consumer to an empowered creator.
Mm-hmm.
The dependent consumer is just waiting for materials and things to come and then just consume it. And you're kind of in a passive mode, kind of barely surviving. But when you're an empowered creator, then life feels so much more meaningful. And you're creating, you're making.
You're co-creating with God.
Right. Very well said, sir. I knew we would hit it off. I figured we would.
I noticed that you're also a musician, so am I.
Yeah. What do you play?
I play a digital horn.
Cool.
And I have for several decades.
Nice.
and I'm into jazz mostly. Like improvisation is where it's at for me.
Oh, nice.
I listen
Yeah,
to music. I listen to music
I'm an
all the time.
explosion of creativity. I like music. I have songs pop in my head all the time, like songs that are being created.
Hmm.
My son will say a phrase and then it'll turn into a song.
Yeah.
My wife will ask me for $100. It turned into a song. So it's just the way my brain works. Like somehow, whatever that thing is that makes a human being creative, like it just kind of exploded in this life for me.
Hmm.
Like I said, not much of it has made me any money or much money to speak of, but it has brought me a lot of pleasure.
What more could you want?
That's right. That's right.
I mean, you look comfortable enough. You're making your life um, sustainable. And
Money is not my God. It never
no,
has been my God. It never will
me
be
either.
my God. As long as I can take care of myself and my people,
Yeah,
that's it. That's my
I
relationship with it.
I totally agree.
It's been nice talking to you.
Morgan, yeah, I feel like I know you a whole lot better.
Yeah, well, actually, this is our first time other than email correspondence, huh?
That's right. Yeah.
You started looking at probably Sustainable Life School, right?
Yeah, I looked. That's exactly right. I went to your website there and your little biography and realized that you and I have a lot of similar interests.
Yeah, well,
Aside,
I remember the first time I heard from you was back in 2009 when we were building our first roundhouse.
uh-huh.
And I had a website up then. I think that was Sustainable Life School or sustainablelife.info. It's long been down, but you guys had come across that and y'all asked if y'all could share some of the stuff on earthbag building. So that was the first time
Uh-huh.
I was introduced to you and Owen.
Yeah.
Well, it's really been a pleasure, and like I said, when I saw that you had been there in San Francisco in that time,
Mm-hmm.
um, that just seems like such an amazing time. Looking at it as somebody who wasn't there, um, but was there a feeling of just of incredible hope at the time? Did it feel like, hey, things are changing and the changes are good?
Well, yeah, there was definitely a feeling of hope, um, and a feeling of involvement with transition and transformation. And and one question you had about why it didn't work, my
Yeah,
answer, my answer to that is that in many ways it did work.
right,
That
right.
there were aspects of expanding consciousness, the use of drugs at the time, the
Yeah,
the um, even the freedom, the sexual freedom, that people were experimenting with, uh,
right.
the back to the land movement, and the experimentation with cooperative living. I think that all of these things were manifest in some ways that was beneficial to the society and
And the world. Yeah,
still and yeah and still is being felt and it helped transform aspects of humanity today.
that's right. Yeah, that can't be argued with. I was saying that to my wife, when I was telling her I was going to interview you and that you had been involved with the diggers and things. And I said, that time and that place, what happened there did change the world.
It did, yeah.
It didn't do away with all darkness and all ignorance and all confusion and violence, and it didn't do away with all that. But as you say, that explosion that happened there, it covered the whole world.
Yes, I totally agree.
Yeah. Always, I mean, we got to be careful here. We're going to go to 2 hours, but as a kid, I was always interested in like science fictions, for example, where you're looking at alternate societies.
Hmm.
or kind of post-apocalyptic societies, or looking at, maybe prehistoric, different things. And I've also been interested in cults. For years I would devour books on cults, just kind of looking at the power dynamic and, what kind of makes them what they are. So, I guess it's natural also that in all that, like the 60s, that time of great transformation, that it's been a naturally interesting time to me as well,
Mm-hmm.
I think, over time I've become more of kind of like a hermit, a part-time hermit. You could call it a part-time hermit. And I don't know if I'm trying to change the culture at large anymore, like I might have once imagined myself trying to. But I think if you are just doing what you love, and I feel like if we're sharing, these ideas, for example, about natural building, then we are changing. Sometimes people will come to me and say, hey, you may not feel like, what you're doing is having a difference, but, they say like the ripples go to the edges of the pond,
Yeah, I agree. I feel like in my own life, the things that I've done have had an effect.
Yeah.
I've been maintaining these websites for 2.5 decades.
You were some of your sites were the early ones I came across when I was getting interested in this.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So, and there's been an awful lot of traffic through the years, and I've impacted a lot of people
Yeah.
through being exposed to the ideas that I promoted.
Well, I hope this interview will expose more people who
I'm
may
sure
not
it
be
will.
familiar,
I'm sure it will.
Yeah.